A little bit ago, I recorded a video on how to report on site search behavior, specifically search terms, in Looker Studio using standard dimensions and a little bit of custom trickery in GA4. A watcher of that video, asked a question of whether or not it would be possible to report on conversions based on what a user searched for on their website. They also asked whether or not it would be possible to report on revenue. We're going to go through how to report on conversions because the answer is yes, it is possible, but kind of tricky. Revenue, as far as I can figure out, is not. It would be possible using GA4 data in BigQuery, but that's a little bit more advanced than what we're going to do today. In tackling this problem, we're going to talk about scope and why this is difficult to do. And I'm going to show you a really cool trick in explorations using segments to get at conversions that follow specific search terms. So let's get started. First, let's see what happens when we try to create an exploration and report on conversions by search term. So I'm going to start with a blank exploration of free form. And for dimension, I'm going to add search term. Then for metrics, for now, we'll just keep it simple. And I'm going to add conversions. Now we're going to make search terms our rows, conversions. So you see here, doesn't really do anything. So let's talk a little bit about the reason for this. I mean, I'm actually a little surprised that we could add conversions as a metric here after adding search term as the dimension. So let's have a look at scope in GA4 because that's why we can't do what we want to do. So here are the three main scopes in GA4: user, session, and event. There's also an item scope for dimensions and metrics. We're not going to talk about that one right now. A good way of thinking about this is that there's parent-child relationships between each of these scopes. So a user is typically identified by a cookie, so it's not necessarily a human being, which is a little bit of a problem because if a person accesses a website and then clears cookies or uses a different browser and device, usually they'll show up as a different user, so multiple users, though one human being. We'll go into that more right now. It doesn't really matter for what we're working on. Session is for a given session. So, and then events are the things that happen within a session. So a user has multiple sessions or could have multiple sessions, and a session always has multiple events. So user scope dimensions describe something about the user. The main user scope dimensions in GA4 describe how a user got to a website in the first place. Most user scope dimensions are prefixed with first user. So an example of that would be first user source medium, which describes the source and medium by which a user got to the website on their first visit. Similarly, session scope dimensions describe something about a session, and the main category of session scope dimensions also describe how a user got to a website for a given session. So the equivalent of the first user source medium is session source medium. And many session scope dimensions are prefixed with session. One worth mentioning is landing page is session scoped and is not prefixed with session, but most session scope dimensions are. Event scope dimensions describe something about a specific event. And there aren't that many event scope dimensions, but search term is one of them. Another one that you probably have encountered is event name. So in our case, what we're interested in is the search term dimension. And the search term dimension comes from a parameter that's attached to a view search results event. And what we want to be able to do is see whether or not specific search terms lead to conversions. And in this case, I threw in contact us as an example of an event that we might count as a conversion. Well, the problem is that the metrics that we use associated with each of these scopes describe something about those scopes. So session metrics are things that exist within a specific session. So like session duration is a super obvious one. With events, those metrics typically just describe something about that particular event. So like view search results, event count is an example of an event scope metric, which tells you how many times the view search results event happened. The problem here is sort of a cause and effect problem, which is that if we have a session scope dimension, like how did somebody get to the website, and then they complete a contact us form, well, that exists below the scope of session, whereas it exists sort of in parallel or side by side with the view search results event. And I mean, one way of thinking about this is that there could be multiple searches that happen, or there could be multiple conversions that happen, and how exactly would you attribute the conversions to the search events? It would be conceivable that Google could include some sort of report that would show sort of correlations of when event A happens in a session, does event B happen in the session? And we'll get into that a little bit more when we look at a funnel report, because there are limited ways to do that. But anyway, this is really, in essence, the problem is that within the scope of search term, there is no concept of a conversion. There's only very limited metrics that have to do with that search term and really primarily event count. So let's have a look at a funnel exploration. Okay, so my free-form exploration that I created here is kind of useless. And now hopefully you kind of understand why the conversions don't have any search term associated with them. So we're going to, I can't delete it yet. I need to create another tab before I can delete that one. So I'm going to go back here. I'm going to delete this. Now, for a funnel exploration, we can define steps very much like creating segments in Universal Analytics, if you're familiar with that. So I'm going to start by creating steps here. I'm going to do a site search. And here, one of the things that I can do with funnel steps is I can pick a specific event and just make that a step. And you may recall, view search results is the event that happens when a user searches on the site. So there's that step. And now I'm going to add a step. And in this case, I'm just going to call it conversion. And I could do something similar where I could pick a specific conversion event if I wanted to do that. In my case, I'm going to just look at all conversions. So I can use this is conversion event, which is a dimension, and I can say exactly matches. And then here it gives me the values, and I'm going to say true. All right, so now what we're looking at is a site search happens and it is indirectly followed by a conversion. You could change that to directly followed by, but what that means is that very next event would have to be a conversion, which is not actually what we want in this case, because the user may not search and then immediately convert. In fact, they probably wouldn't. So we'll leave that way, and we're going to apply that. Okay, so now what this is showing me is site searches that lead to conversion. So the interesting thing that I can do here now is I can add search term as a breakdown dimension. And you can see, so now you can see here we've got search terms, and the completion rate is the percentage of those users that ended up converting. And here we have 10 abandonments. With a little bit of math, you can see that there would be 4 conversions here. So we have the completion rate, which is the conversion rate, and we have a way of deducing actual conversions. And we can download this into a spreadsheet, which is what I kind of like to do when I'm analyzing this data. The big limitation with this report, this gets us really close to what we want. The big limitation with this report is the most we can do is pick 15 search terms. Well, I don't love that. So I'm going to show you a super cool trick. Pretty close with what we want. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to mouse over conversion here, and I'm going to right click, and it says create segment from users. So I'm going to pick that. And now what this is doing is it's creating a segment of people that did the view search result site search, and then completed a conversion. And I'm going to save that. Now we're going to do something tricky with this. So now we're going to create a free form exploration. And we've got our site search conversion segment, which is users who did a search and then converted. I'm going to do a couple of things here. I'm going to add another segment. Unfortunately, as far as I can tell, this doesn't exist. So I'm going to do an all users segment, and I'm just going to say all users is anyone who has a session start event. Every session starts with a session start event. So apply that. Now I'm going to add a metric. In this case, I'm going to say active users, which is the equivalent of the users metric in regular reporting. Now, what I'm going to do is, for rows, I'm going to put my search term. And then for values, I'm going to put active users. Then I'm going to add my users who did a search and then converted. So this is the total number of users who searched this. And then this is the users with conversions. So you can see like we're getting really close. Well, we're actually pretty much there. Like, so we have 18 users who searched this, 4 that converted. We can't in an exploration do the calculation of conversion rate, but we can easily go up here and export it into Google Sheets or into a CSV and import it into an Excel doc and do that conversion rate calculation. The very last thing that I'm going to do here is click over here, and I'm going to add a filter on search term. I'm going to do something a little sneaky. I'm going to do matches a regular expression, which is like a form of pattern matching. And the regular expression for any character, basically anything that's not null or not a empty string, is dot plus. So that got rid of that first row because those weren't actually searches. So now we have all the search terms, whether or not they converted. We can increase the number of rows to up to 500 here. So I'm going to pick 100 just so you can get a feeling for it. And this annoying bar chart view, get rid of that. And there you go. So we have all the search terms, users that search them, whether or not they converted. And the one caveat I'll say is that this isn't perfect in the sense of shows users who search these things. We don't actually know whether the next thing they did, what search they did before converting. So like if they searched for apple, banana, orange and then converted, maybe you would want to attribute the conversion to orange because it was the last thing they searched. This is just going to show you users who searched search terms and then converted. So the same user could show up in multiple rows here. In my opinion, that's fine. Totally gives me an idea of the types of things people are searching for on the site that tend to lead to conversions, even if not 100% perfect. So there you have it. That's it. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this video helpful, please click the like button. Really appreciate it. And check out 2octobers.com, my website. We have more videos, blog posts. We also help organizations with GA4 setups and Looker Studio and Tag Manager and other analytics tasks. And we do training as well. So check us out, and thanks again.